January 1990, British Vogue cover. 5 women in black bodysuits and jeans, shot in stark black and white. Their names would become legends: Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, and there, positioned right in the center, a woman with piercing eyes and an otherworldly presence that somehow commanded the frame without trying. Her name was Tatjana Patitz. Within months, George Michael would handpick these exact 5 models for what became one of the most iconic music videos of all time. The fashion world would crown this moment the birth of the supermodel era. But here's what's wild. While 4 of those women became household names, the one standing in the center, the one photographers called their muse, quietly faded from public memory. How does someone go from the epicenter of fashion history to being called the forgotten supermodel? How does a woman who defined an entire era somehow become invisible? Today, we're diving into the story of Tatjana Patitz, the enigmatic beauty who walked away from everything the fashion world offered, and in doing so, created a legacy more powerful than fame itself. Let's rewind to 1983. Tatjana Patitz was 17 years old, living in the seaside town of Skanör in southern Sweden. Think about that for a second. Not exactly a fashion capital. Her father was a travel journalist, her mother a former dancer who'd performed at Paris's Lolito Cabaret. But Tatjana, she was a tomboy who loved horses more than anything else in the world.
Start riding. When did you start riding?
When I was 5 years old.
Oh my gosh, you were just a baby.
Yeah, I started when I was 5 in Germany, and then we moved to Sweden and I continued riding there. I did a lot of hunter jumper.
At age 7, she'd learned to ride and quickly became a competitive equestrian. This wasn't some casual hobby. She was seriously considering pursuing it professionally.
I loved horses, and I pretended my bicycle was a horse. I put a pillow on it and shoestrings and went into the forest and just over rocks and really, I don't know. Had a very imaginative childhood that way.
Then her friends did something that would change everything. Without telling her, they entered her photos in the elite model look competition in Stockholm. She didn't win. She didn't even come close to winning. 3rd place. That's it. 3rd place in a Swedish modeling contest that most people had never heard of. But that 3rd place finish came with a prize, a trip to Paris, and a short-term modeling contract. Most success stories would tell you this was the moment everything clicked. Wrong. Tatjana arrived in Paris and found absolutely nothing. No work for an entire year. Picture this statuesque 5'11" teenager, fresh from small-town Sweden, wandering around Paris getting rejection after rejection. Vogue later wrote, "A star was not quickly born," which is fashion speak for she struggled. This wasn't some overnight Cinderella transformation. This was a year of hearing no in 3 different languages, probably questioning whether she'd made a huge mistake leaving her horses behind in Sweden. She was competing against girls who'd been modeling since childhood, who spoke perfect French, who understood the unspoken rules of an industry that seemed designed to break newcomers. But something about Tatjana was different. Maybe it was her multicultural background, German father, Estonian mother, raised in Sweden, that gave her resilience. Maybe it was all those years of competitive horseback riding that taught her persistence. Whatever it was, she didn't give up. She didn't run home to the safety of her small Swedish town. She stayed, took whatever small job she could get, and that persistence would eventually change fashion history. Everything shifted in the mid-1980s when a German photographer named Peter Lindbergh entered Tatjana's orbit. Lindbergh had this vision. He wanted to capture natural beauty, unretouched and real. In an industry obsessed with artificial perfection, he was looking for something authentic. When he found Tatjana, it was like finding the missing piece of a puzzle he'd been trying to solve. Her classical features, that intense gaze, the way she moved, it all clicked for him. But it wasn't just her looks. Tatjana had something deeper. She could convey emotion without saying a word, tell a story with just her expression. In an industry full of beautiful faces, she had a soul that showed through the camera lens. Lindbergh started featuring her in shoots for French Vogue, working with her to develop that signature look. Suddenly, the fashion world took notice. Here was a model who didn't just wear clothes. She inhabited them. She didn't just pose. She created characters. Then came 1988. Lindbergh organized a shoot that would become legendary. White shirts, 6 supermodels, Malibu. 6 women in white shirts on a beach, laughing laughing and playing like they were just friends hanging out. But look at that photo now, and your eyes go straight to Tatjana. There's something about her smile, her ease with the camera, the way she seems both approachable and untouchable at the same time. That shoot was the warm-up act for what came next. January 1990, British Vogue. Lindbergh convinced the magazine to put 5 of these women on the cover together, something that had never been done before. Models sharing a cover? Unheard of. But there they were. Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, and Tatjana Patitz. The image is now considered one of the most important fashion photographs ever taken. It's the moment the industry shifted from models being beautiful mannequins to becoming personalities, celebrities in their own right. And Tatjana wasn't just part of this revolution. She was literally at its center. Here's what's crazy though. That same month, while British Vogue featured the group, American Vogue put Tatjana solo on their cover. Shot by Herb Ritz, she's wearing this striking black and white Isaac Mizrahi jacket, and her gaze is so intense it's almost hypnotic. 2 major Vogue covers in 1 month. That doesn't happen by accident. By late 1990, the fashion world was buzzing about these 5 women. Then, George Michael saw the British Vogue cover and had an idea that would cement their place in pop culture forever. He was planning a music video for Freedom 90, and he wanted those exact 5 models to star in it. Think about this for a moment. A pop star at the height of his fame chooses to make a music video with no celebrities, no actors, just these 5 models lip-syncing his lyrics. It was directed by David Fincher, who would later make Fight Club and The Social Network. The budget was massive, the production was cinematic, and the result was pure magic. When that video premiered on MTV, it didn't just become a hit, it became a cultural moment. Suddenly, these weren't just models anymore, they were icons. Tatjana later said filming Freedom 90 was transformative. It made me more recognizable in a different way. Fashion, music, and film were blending together, and she was at the epicenter of it all. The work started pouring in from every direction. Every major designer wanted Tatjana Patitz walking their runway, wearing their clothes, representing their vision. She graced the runways of Gianni Versace, where she walked alongside the other supers in shows that felt more like rock concerts than fashion presentations. She worked with Karl Lagerfeld at Chanel, bringing his elegant designs to life with her understated sophistication. Christian Dior, Giorgio Armani, Valentino. The list reads like a who's who of fashion royalty. Her look, athletic yet refined, strong yet feminine, proved incredibly versatile. She could sell both high glamour and minimalist chic. One day, she'd be in a dramatic Versace gown looking like a Greek goddess. The next, in a simple Calvin Klein campaign, looking like the girl next door if the girl next door happened to be impossibly beautiful. But it was her connection with Jill Sander that really defined this era. Sander, the German minimalist designer, found in Tatjana the perfect embodiment of sophisticated restraint. Tatjana became the face of the brand, fronting campaigns throughout the early 90s. It was a match made in fashion heaven, the understated designer and the model who could convey depth without saying a word. Sky magazine crowned her the first German supermodel, and the fashion press started calling this period the era of Tatjana, not the era of supermodels, the era of Tatjana. She was at the absolute peak of her powers, commanding top dollar, booking every major campaign. This should have been the beginning of decades of dominance. Instead, it was the moment she decided to walk away. Here's where Tatjana's story takes a turn that no one saw coming. In 1989, right as her career was exploding, she made a decision that shocked the entire fashion industry. She left. Not just a job or a campaign, she left the whole scene. Paris, New York, Milan, goodbye to all of it. Instead, she bought a ranch near Malibu and moved to California. Picture the most successful model in the world trading Parisian runways for horseback riding and open spaces. While her peers were fighting for the best apartments in Manhattan, Tatjana was learning to care for 4 horses, 4 dogs, and 2 cats. I needed nature around me, she explained years later, and you can hear in those words how suffocating the fashion world had become for her. This wasn't some temporary retreat or a strategic career move. This This was a woman choosing her sanity over her success. The industry couldn't understand it. In fashion, the conventional wisdom was simple. Strike while the iron is hot. Maximize your peak years. Milk every opportunity for exposure. Why would someone at the absolute peak of fame deliberately make themselves less accessible? In modeling, visibility is everything. You need to be seen at the right parties, available for last-minute bookings, constantly networking, and maintaining relationships. Tatjana was choosing geographical isolation instead. Her peers thought she was crazy. Agents probably tried to talk her out of it, but Tatjana had experienced something that many successful models never do. She'd figured out the difference between being famous and being fulfilled, and fulfillment for her meant wide-open spaces, animals to care for, and silence when she needed it. But here's what's beautiful about this decision. It worked for her. She continued taking select jobs, flying in for specific shoots or campaigns that excited her, but she was doing it on her terms now. No more grinding through endless castings or showing up to industry events she didn't care about. This move also revealed something fundamental about Tatjana's character. She wasn't addicted to fame the way many people become. She didn't need constant validation or media attention. What she needed was space to breathe, to think, to be herself without a camera pointed at her every moment. If moving to California was Tatjana's first major life choice that prioritized personal happiness over career advancement, becoming a mother was the second, and it was even more dramatic. In 2004, at age 38, Tatjana gave birth to her son, Jonah Johnson. She'd separated from Jonah's father, Jason Johnson, and chose to raise her son as a single mother. For most celebrities, this might mean hiring nannies and assistants to maintain their career momentum. Tatjana did the exact opposite. For the past 5 years, I have been very active in my son's life. I didn't want to hand him over to a nanny, she told The Guardian in 2009. Read that again. She deliberately scaled back one of the most successful modeling careers in history because she wanted to be present for her child. This wasn't just reducing her workload slightly or taking a brief hiatus. This was turning down lucrative campaigns that could have set her up financially for life, missing fashion weeks where her presence alone would have generated headlines, saying no to opportunities that other models would literally kill for. Jobs that required constant travel? Not happening. Multi-day shoots that would take her away from Jonah for extended periods? Sorry, not interested. Brand partnerships that demanded her constant availability? Not worth it. The fashion world kept offering her everything: more money, bigger campaigns, prestigious collaborations, and she kept saying no if it interfered with being the mother she wanted to be. This level of career sacrifice was almost unheard of in an industry where models typically have narrow windows of peak earning potential. She admitted being a single mom could be pretty stressful, but it's wonderful, and called Jonah her source of happiness. You can hear in these words how completely her priorities had shifted. The woman who once graced covers of Vogue was now measuring success by completely different standards. When asked in 2009 if she'd want a big campaign again, she said, "I wouldn't say no. The jobs I still do are perfect. They fit in with my life." Notice that phrase, "they fit in with my life," not the other way around. The work had to adapt to her life, not the reverse. This period cemented Tatjana's reputation as the forgotten supermodel. While Naomi, Cindy, and Linda remained constantly visible through TV shows, business ventures, and high-profile relationships, Tatjana was focused on school pickup and helping with homework. The fashion world kept spinning without her, and she seemed perfectly content to let it. By the 2000s, something fascinating had happened to Tatjana's public image. Within the fashion industry, she remained revered. Photographers still spoke of her with reverence. Designers still considered her a legend. Anna Wintour went on record calling her one of my favorite models. But ask someone outside the fashion bubble about Tatjana Patitz in 2005, and you'd probably get a blank stare. This wasn't an accident. It was the natural result of her choices. While her peers maintained constant public presence through red carpet appearances, reality shows, business ventures, and carefully orchestrated paparazzi shots, Tatjana was living quietly on her ranch. The Guardian captured this perfectly in a 2009 article, noting that 4 of them are still world famous. Yet Tatjana Patitz goes largely unrecognized. It wasn't that she'd failed, it was that she'd chosen invisibility in an age of manufactured celebrity. This created an interesting phenomenon. Within fashion circles, Tatjana became almost mythical. She was the one who got away, the supermodel who didn't need the spotlight to validate her worth. Peter Lindbergh wrote in his book, 10 Women, "I admire Tatjana because she always stays herself. She's very soft, but at the same time, very strong and knows how to stand up for what she thinks. Occasionally, she'd resurface for special projects." In 2011, Vogue organized a nostalgic Good Genes shoot featuring the original supermodels. There was Tatjana again, looking timeless alongside Cindy, Naomi, and Eva Herzigova. In 2012, Lindbergh photographed her at her California ranch with young Jonah, a serene editorial that perfectly captured the life she'd built away from fashion's glare. These appearances felt like gifts to the fashion world, brief glimpses of someone who had once been everywhere but now appeared only when she felt like it. Each time, the industry was reminded of what they'd been missing. The media started calling her the most underrated supermodel, a title that says everything about how her legacy was perceived. Not failed, not forgotten by those who mattered, but somehow overlooked by the broader culture that had once worshipped her image. When designer Etro invited her to walk their runway in the mid-2000s and 10s, seeing Tatjana stride down the catwalk again drew cheers and headlines. She was in her late 40s then, and she moved with the same confidence and grace that had made her famous decades earlier. It was proof that true presence doesn't fade. It just becomes more refined with age. On January 11th, 2023, the fashion world lost one of its most enigmatic figures. Tatjana Patitz passed away at age 56 after a private battle with metastatic breast cancer, an illness she had not publicly disclosed. The news sent shockwaves through the industry. Tributes poured in from around the globe, and suddenly, people were being educated about someone they should have been paying attention to all along. Cindy Crawford wrote that Tatjana was the embodiment of European chic, and who could ever forget those piercing eyes? The Peter Lindbergh Foundation memorialized her for her kindness, inner beauty, and outstanding intelligence. But perhaps the most telling aspect of these obituaries was how they had to explain who she was. Headlines read, "One of the original supermodels," introducing her to readers who might not have recognized the name. It was both sad and fitting. Even in death, Tatjana remained somewhat mysterious to the general public. The fashion press used her death as an opportunity to reassess her legacy. Articles highlighted how she'd expanded beauty standards, championed natural over artificial looks, and proven that a model could have artistic integrity without constant self-promotion. In a way, her passing forced people to confront what they'd overlooked while she was alive. There's something poetic about how Tatjana's story ended. She died privately, surrounded by family, away from cameras and headlines. Even her final chapter reflected the values she'd lived by: authenticity over performance, substance over spectacle, love over fame. Her son Jonah, the priority she'd chosen over countless magazine covers, was by her side. The ranch where she'd found peace became her final sanctuary. The horses she'd loved since childhood were still there, in the fields she'd chosen over runways. The January 1990 Vogue cover still hangs in fashion museums around the world. 5 women who changed an industry forever. 4 became household names. 1 became something rarer, a legend who chose to live on her own terms. Maybe that's the most powerful kind of icon of all. Tatjana Patitz didn't just walk runways. She walked away, and in doing so, she left behind a legacy that's more compelling than any headline, more lasting than any trend, more beautiful than any photograph. She proved that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply choose to be yourself, even when the whole world is watching, especially when the whole world is watching.